7 years after bringing down steel buildings with jet fuel, using planes as missiles, and outwitting the most high-tech air force and the most protected airspace in the world for nearly 2 hours, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Al-Qaeda's number 2, is celebrating 9/11 with an hour-and-a-half video called 7 Years of Crusades, where he basically says that the Persians, the Iranians, are allied with the US to fight Islam in Iraq and in Afghanistan. The US, meanwhile, is stepping up the war on terror deep inside Pakistani territory, with Special Forces commandos targeting the tribal areas. While US corporate media is transfixed by Sarah Palin, the lipstick pitbull, a new war in the shadows is acquiring irreversible momentum. I sat down with investigative military historian Gareth Porter to examine the disconnect between the Bush administration and the US intelligence community, the fact that Al-Qaeda now is a very, very different enemy compared to 2001, 7 years ago, and the potentially devastating consequences of the US starting a war inside Pakistan. Gareth, apparently now, Al-Qaeda's main enemy are Shiites and Persians, and not the US and the West. Does anybody in the US intelligence community, not to mention the Bush administration, are they aware of it?
Oh, I'm sure they are aware of it. No question about it. And of course, this is not a new theme. I mean, this is something that we've gotten based on some captured documents in the past 2 or 3 years. The Al-Qaeda output has focused on a number of occasions on the supposed alliance between Iran and the United States, and also, even I would say more importantly, on the importance of trying to split the United States and Iran, and even to get the United States to go to war against Iran. So I think that this is really part of the Al-Qaeda viewpoint. That is to say, they still hope to turn the United States again against Iran, to make it part of their overall strategy to damage Iran through the United States. I think it's correct that you do see a shift from 2001 or even 2002, 2003. You have more and more focus on the Shiites as the enemy, more focus on Iran as the enemy. Certainly that's true in Iraq, as well as more generally in terms of the Al-Qaeda leadership messages. Now, it's very interesting that in Afghanistan as well, you have a very major shift in the nature of the so-called enemy in terms of who's actually fighting the United States and NATO troops on the ground in Afghanistan. What's happening is that it's no longer the original Al-Qaeda regime, the Taliban regime, which the United States thought it was fighting in 2001, 2002. There's still some of the original Taliban people who are there in Afghanistan, but to a great extent, there has been a shift to the new Taliban, the neo-Taliban, people coming from Pakistan, who trained in Pakistan, of course, but whose interests are really generated by the fact that the United States is there fighting in Afghanistan. You now have a broader coalition of people that the United States is fighting in Afghanistan. It's no longer by any means a unified adversary at all, and that this is something that's constantly shifting, constantly changing, so that it underlines the fundamental point here that the United States military presence in Afghanistan really is the dynamic factor here that brings about changes in the politics within Afghanistan of who's fighting us, where they're coming from, what their motives are, and ultimately, of course, what the makeup of any post-occupation regime is going to be affected by that very factor. If the United States withdraws from Afghanistan, everything's going to change again, just as it changed when the United States went in there.
We can say that the surge in Afghanistan, and especially in the Pakistani tribal areas, has already started. So let's say that this is a counterpart of the Iraqi surge. In the Iraqi surge, there was a very, very dirty war. What Petraeus was trying to do, he was trying to isolate and kill the Sunni Arab guerrilla leaders. Is he trying to do the same thing in the Pakistani tribal areas, targeting, in this case, Pashtun leaders? He'll be fighting against 40 million Pashtuns and not only 6 or 7 million Sunni Arabs Is he aware of that?
I think it's very important to underline the fact that there's a lot of hype here from Bob Woodward's book about this high-tech supposed secret weapon that was unveiled in Iraq, which was supposedly so successful against the Sunni insurgents in al-Qaeda. What fundamentally happened in Sunni Iraq was that the Sunni insurgency, which represented 90 to 95% of those who were fighting the United States occupation, decided to turn against al-Qaeda because al-Qaeda was basically opposing their strategy. They were at odds with al-Qaeda for strategic reasons. And it was in spite of the U.S. military presence rather than because of the U.S. military presence that they turned against al-Qaeda. And it was the decision to turn against al-Qaeda politically which determined the ultimate weakening of al-Qaeda, not the high-tech contraptions that the United States brought to bear. That was a relatively minor factor. I think any history of this episode will show that that's the case. So when you now look at Pakistan, the situation there, of course, is one where the United States has to have some intelligence in order to target these supposed al-Qaeda and Taliban leadership that they're supposed to be bombing or raiding with their special forces.
And they don't have on-the-ground intelligence, Waziristan, for instance.
They just don't know enough to be able to target this. An intelligence official of the U.S. government told Eli Lake of the New York Sun this week that the targeting of al-Qaeda and Taliban was so chancy that he called it shots in the dark. And he said, well, at least if we send the ground troops, the special forces into Pakistan, maybe they'll be able to get some information which will improve the targeting. So in other words, they're winging it. They really don't have the intelligence. And that's the fundamental weakness of this whole idea of going in there with special forces and with the drones.